Hi, welcome to Positive Panic Attacks. My name's Tim, and today I wanted to discuss agoraphobia. Now, you probably think you know what this means, but I'm going to do a quick presentation on some points that you probably haven't heard before. It's derived from the Greek word meaning gathering place, and it's an anxiety disorder characterized by anxiety in situations where the sufferer perceives certain events or environments are dangerous or uncomfortable, often due to the environment's vast openness or crowdedness. These situations include, but are not limited to, wide open spaces, as well as uncomfortable situations, such as the possibility of meeting someone in shopping malls, airports, or bridges. Basically, over the last few years, agoraphobia has been redefined as a panic disorder, and at the root of this is the fear of actually having a panic attack in the environment which the sufferer is afraid of. Usually the sufferer can go to great lengths to avoid meeting people in these situations, and you've probably heard of where agoraphobia is more famous, is where the sufferer actually stays in their own home because they perceive this is their safe place, if you like. But it also can mean just trying to escape from somewhere and going to another safe place, such as their car or a quieter place. That would also be classified as agoraphobia. Now, I wanted to talk about the meaning of agoraphobia, and I wanted to delve into the history a little bit. It was actually a term coined by the German neurologist Westphal in 1871. Now, Westphal was a neurologist, a German neurologist, and he had 4 patients, all of which were men, which was a bit unusual, as women tend to suffer from this more than men. And he described how several of them used alcohol to reduce their fear. And he termed agoraphobia from the Greek word, as I've discussed before, meaning marketplace, because they were afraid of going into market. Westphal felt that this was appropriate because it described how people felt vulnerable in public places, particularly when there was no sort of immediate exit. It's been also called many other things, and one thing which is a bit of a mouthful, it has been coined by another neurologist many years ago, is the phobic anxiety depersonalization syndrome. So that's a bit of a mouthful, and I can kind of understand why that didn't catch on. Right, the agoraphobic cluster. The problem with this is that many agoraphobics have a number of fears that are separate but are related to the same everyday activity. This is often quite common amongst sufferers, and is known as the agoraphobic cluster. And each fear really needs to be treated individually. So, for an example, if you fear going to the shops, it could be you fear the symptoms, you fear someone else talking to you, you fear being embarrassed or making yourself look silly in front of other people. So it's all those kind of things that need to be treated, really. Right. So what really causes agoraphobia? Well, agoraphobia affects people in many different ways, but basically it's nearly always the same feeling of feeling trapped in a place and needing to escape to somewhere as they perceive more safe. The agoraphobic cluster comes into the situation as their fears can cause panic attacks. So each individual fear can trigger a panic attack or anxiety in the person. Now, these are not limited to, but the main things which cause agoraphobia are enclosed environments such as boats, ships, cinema, trains, places like that. Places where leaving is embarrassing, so like the dentists, in queues, in meetings, in hairdressers, and crowded places like pubs, festivals, restaurants, large shops. As you can tell by the name, agoraphobia is actually a phobia more than anything else, and can be treated and can be unlearnt. It's basically learnt behaviour. You aren't born fearing these places, it's just the way you've perceived the environments, probably after a stressful period in your life, or if you're not looking after yourself. There are also other kinds of phobias, environmental, and these can be things like lightning, wind, thunder. They can trigger panic attacks and agoraphobia. There can be bodily phobias, such as the fearing of the symptoms of sweating or the heart palpitation, things like that, or fearing something terrible is going to happen, like you're going to vomit, stroke, have a heart attack, or maybe even something is, well, to a normal person would seem silly, but something like blushing. There can be social phobias, such as eating or drinking in public places, which are all linked to agoraphobia. So you might not want to drink or eat in front of anyone. And then there's sorts of other simple phobias can be related to the bigger picture of agoraphobia, such as a fear of dogs or birds or insects or something like that. So how common is agoraphobia? Well, there's been quite a bit of research done on it, and it usually develops between 18 and 35 years of age. That's when the symptoms normally kick in, and amazingly it can affect up to between 1.5 and 3.5% of the population, and it's estimated that between 0.5 and 1% of the population are basically stuck in their homes. They might be able to get out a little bit, but they're really restricted to what they can do. So it's a huge problem. In its less severe form, it's estimated that there's about 1 in 8 people that suffer from agoraphobic symptoms, but they might not be restricted to their house. That's roughly about 5 to 7 million people. So, as I've said before, panic disorder and agoraphobia are extremely linked together. Panic disorder is basically fear of having a panic attack, and if you have a panic attack and are very fearful of having another one, you don't really understand what's happening, then the chances are you're going to develop a panic disorder. The American classification system has kind of linked agoraphobia with panic disorder condition. As it states, panic attacks are at its core. This is open to dispute, and it's not treated this way in the UK. But personally, I think the two are very much interlinked. If you solve your panic disorder, you're going to cure yourself of agoraphobia. As I've said before, it seems to develop in early adult life. This is probably because that's when you're leaving your safety of your home and you're under stress and you want to get a job and might not be looking after yourself. And although some people do come forward in their 40s and 50s after experiencing or saying they've got agoraphobia, it's normally because the symptoms have got worse over time and they've developed them much earlier, but it hasn't come to the forefront until they're in their 40s or 50s. If there's been no previous history of agoraphobic symptoms, then usually it's linked to other form of illness, such as depression. So what is agoraphobia? As I've said before, it's the fear of being trapped somewhere that you can't escape from. And this could be a huge number of things, as I've discussed before, like a motorway, if you're driving on a motorway, a theme park, a shopping centre. And traditionally it's been associated with a fear of wide open spaces. And this has kind of been linked to some sort of evolutionary theory, if you like, that when we were cavemen, going into an open space meant danger, as we could be attacked by someone, or like a saber-toothed tiger or another tribe. But I don't really buy into that line of thinking. I don't think it's anything to do with that. if you want to know the exact figures, as I've discussed before, on how common it is, then mind.org.uk go into much more detail about that. But in the UK, it's estimated to affect around 10 million people. And like I said, it's much more common in women. About 4% of women have agoraphobia to only 2% of men. I thought it's also worth mentioning some of the famous people who've suffered from agoraphobia. These include Billy Bob Thornton. He's an actor. You might have heard of Howard Hughes, who's an eccentric billionaire. Probably wouldn't have heard of Philip K. Dick. He actually wrote one of my most favourite films, Blade Runner. He wrote the book and then it was turned into a film. He also wrote Total Recall with Arnold Schwarzenegger. Woody Allen is said to have suffered from both agoraphobia and claustrophobia, and also the person who developed psychoanalysis, Sigmund Freud, is said to have suffered from agoraphobia, as is the famous Hollywood actress Kim Basinger, who actually did a documentary on the HBO channel about it. There's lots of people who have suffered from agoraphobia, and there's probably thousands of well-known people that just don't make a big thing about it and haven't come out in public about it, but underneath the surface they suffer from the symptoms in some shape or form. Well, I've touched on this before. It usually develops through some of life's series of stressors, if you like. If you've been under a certain amount of stress for a certain period, or it might even have been a single trauma or bad experience that is kicked it in. Also, some people say that sometimes the symptoms come and go, and sometimes for several weeks they feel a lot better, and then they can have a bad period again. Quite often people will tolerate it for many years until it kind of reaches a crisis point where they can't go on holiday or something like that, and then they seek treatment for it. So what are the symptoms of agoraphobia? Well, if you go to my website, I've got a link which below here, which will kind of give you an article of everything I've discussed. But if you go to my website and click on what are the symptoms of a panic attack, which is one of the articles I've got on my website, so there's a link on the bottom of every page to that article. You'll find the symptoms there. So I'm not going to go through them now, but it's the typical heart palpitations, tensing, sweating, headaches, feeling utter panic, feeling like you're going to die. So please go and read that article. Now I wanted to discuss in its various degrees agoraphobia can come from worrying when you're going to leave the safety of your home. So it's associated with worry, if you like. It's that perception you will have a panic attack or you will not be safe when you leave home. It may be a fear of being in a crowded place that you can't escape from. It's again feeling like trapped when you're unable to, maybe like when you're driving on the motorway and you're unable to find a slip road which you can get from. Maybe being stuck in a claustrophobic place like a lift. Public transport is a big one for people when they go on a bus or train, or especially a plane. They're not going to be able to get any help if they suffer from a panic attack or an agoraphobic experience. Standing in a queue is another very common one. Quite often people will only go out if they have a safe person with them. It can be a fear of going over bridges, a fear, something which might seem utterly stupid to a normal person, in inverted commas, but something like the dentist chair or hairdresser's chair that people just can't stand to stay in as the pressure kind of builds up for them to escape and leave. it's the feeling associated with the above that you will like lose control, or you'll freak out, or you'll embarrass yourself. And to conclude, I would just like to say I've suffered from all the above, and I've conquered all my fears 100%. I didn't really want to turn this presentation into about me, but more give you a general overview about agoraphobia. But if you are suffering from some of the above, it's likely that you may have a mild case of agoraphobia. If you're suffering from all the above, then you certainly will be suffering from panic disorder and agoraphobia. So it's nothing to fear. It can 100% be cured. All the information is on my website, and if you feel you really need some, like a program of recovery, which is ultimately what got me better, then I do have a program of recovery on my website, or you can have the free ebook, which will give you all the kind of basic things you need to get better again. But it's really a case of looking after yourself. That's first and foremost, and also challenging what you're thinking, because it's your thoughts which are making you ill. I know that may seem hard to believe, but that's the truth. So hopefully I've helped you in, or if you're reading about this for research or helping someone else, hopefully that's enlightened you a little bit. Anyway, thanks for listening, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.